Hi, today we're going to talk about teaching in a hybrid situation and how to have success with that. Today we're going to talk about the strategy of using pause points. This strategy comes from the book, Teaching in the Online Classroom. We've gotten several of our tips from there, and it talks about losing kids when you don't engage them right away, right? One of the things you notice when you present online is that if you go too long without directly engaging the students, that you lose them, right? Conversely, when we stop and we engage them directly, kids are more energetic and they're more engaged throughout the lesson. So how can we use this strategy to our advantage, to our success? How can we stop and have these pause points set up that we're going to have some success with it? So the challenge of online learning applies for kids and teachers, right? We all know that when we go online and we're doing a presentation online, we're definitely more passive right from the get-go, right? We log on, maybe we turn our cameras off, maybe we have another tab open, we have two screens going on, we're doing something else, right? We open up some emails to check to see what we might have missed, right? So if teachers are doing this, if adults are doing this, what are the kids doing, right? So the authors have saw that was happening, and they found out as they were doing their presentations in the early stages of the pandemic and online instruction that people weren't engaged at all. And they wanted to find out what are some ways that they could fix this, right? And one of the things they found was to take a pause point and to actively try to engage the kids at certain points throughout the lesson. So let's look at some tips to do this. So if you're going to use pause points, if you're going to stop and engage the students, you should try to start it early. So have your first pause point within 3 to 5 minutes of the lesson, right? Don't just start the lecture and go on. I do it all the time. I'm a talker, and I apologize that this is a pre-recorded video and I cannot engage you directly, but at this point, I would have done it right about now. So a couple of minutes in, I'm going to start my first pause and directly engage the students with some sort of activity, right? And then after that, I'm going to try to make sure that my pause points are about every 5 minutes, right? And depending on the age group, maybe it's a little bit sooner, a little bit later. Maybe you can let the older kids go a little bit longer, right? By having these pause points where you directly address the students, you're sending a clear message that they have to be ready to be actively involved, right? That everybody is on the hook for these things. And the other thing is that by putting these pause points in our lesson, it helps us to chunk the lesson, and it helps to increase the kids' ability to use their working memory, right? So they can stop, they have a chance to reflect on what they've learned before they move on to the next piece. So there are four purposes for using pause points. The first one is to build a culture of accountability and a culture of engagement, right? So we're going to stop and we're going to have the kids formulate questions or something like that every couple of minutes, right? So I remember I used to have a teacher that taught social studies next to me, and he had a great cache of these old film strips, right? And he would play the film strip with the cassette recorder next to him, and it would beep before he would have to turn the film strip onto the next film slide. And he would, every time the beep went off, beep, he would tell the kids, okay, I want you to write a question based on what you just heard and what you just saw. The kids would write it down. He had this built into the framework of the slideshow. So we can do that in our classrooms too. You know, we can stop and we can ask the kids, we're doing a lesson on carbon emissions. We can say, what are some advantages and disadvantages of carbon emissions, of trying to lower carbon emissions, right? Have the kids write that down, right? They could write that down to share out at a certain point later. They could put it in the chat. They could do a waterfall activity where you have everybody type an answer, right? So I want everybody to think of an advantage of lowering carbon emissions. So maybe, you know, lower greenhouse gases, you know, stop global warming, right? They type that in, you wait, you count to 3 and say, on the count of 3, I want everybody to hit the send button and we're going to send it in the chat, and then everybody sends it. Or you tell them to think of the disadvantages, right? It might be expensive, it might put people out of jobs, it might change the energy industry, whatever the disadvantage might be, right? They send it then. So having these points of cognitive engagement and also accountability, because you're expecting everybody to answer. If you're using Nearpod, you can build these right in as pause points, and you can have those assessments right in there. Great for asynchronous learning. Also for asynchronous learning, You could build them into Schoology and put the lessons so that kids have to have certain completion rules. So you have to do this. So maybe I have to answer a discussion board question before I get the next part of my lesson to do, right? So you know this from PD experiences that you do, on Superintendent's Conference Day. You've done this where you've had these pause points built in to Nearpod and into Schoology. So think about how you could do it in a creative way, right? And then the next thing with it is that it allows the kids to have some formative thinking going on, right? So they can respond to each other. You could set up a protocol where they read each other's discussion posts, and maybe they use a strategy like the compliment, question, suggestion strategy. That's one I used to use all the time. We would read other people's stuff in the AP class. The kids would give a compliment, something they liked. They would ask a question, maybe something for clarification, and they would give a suggestion, right? And if they didn't have a great suggestion, maybe their suggestion would be, you really hit all the clear points. Keep being clear in your analysis, right? So it could be something like that, right? These also give you a chance formatively to read what the kids are writing down in these posts, right? It's good to have them written because then you can always go back and reflect on them later, right? And it allows you to have a check for understanding. So a third great thing about pause points is it gives you a chance for a check for understanding. Imagine going through a lesson and kids just let you keep going and they don't understand and you don't know that they don't understand and they're not ready for the next piece, right? Especially in things where they all build upon the previous steps, right? It would be like showing a movie and you think everyone's watching the movie, but you're not sharing the right screen and no one's really watching it, but nobody really told you they weren't watching it. And then they can't do the next step because the whole 5 minutes of the movie were a waste. That's happened. I've heard people say that that's happened. So it gives you a great chance for a check for understanding. And then lastly, it sets up a really good place for retrieval practice, right? So we know with long-term memory that even under the best situations that the next day, 24 hours, cognitive science shows that a lot of times we don't even remember half of what we learned the day before. So by stopping and having these places, these little pause points where we can have retrieval practice, right? So stopping, reflecting on what we've learning, by stopping along the way and having this distributive type of practice, it helps us to remember things more long-term. So it's great for that way. And lastly, it's great because it gives everybody a chance to take a break, right? Get a drink of water, think about it, just stop for a second. Maybe I need to get up and stretch, and then we move on after the accountability piece. So these are some ideas about how to use pause points for hybrid teaching success. I hope that you give it a shot. Be creative with it. I hope that you can use these short interactive moments and embed them in your lesson. They can take a variety of forms. We can, if you want to have some help in creating some of these things or using some of the rules in Schoology for completion or mastery learning type things, please let me know. I'd love to help you with it. Remember to use them often, and the pause points often and early, to send kids a clear message that this is going to be an interactive lesson and that they need to be engaged and stay on their toes. So good luck and have a great day.